Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan from Fireside Yankees, and I am joined by a very special guest. National MLB reporter Michael Marino is joining the show to talk about not just rumors related to the Yankees, but rumors around the league in general. And, obviously the Juan Soto trade is the big thing for not just the Yankees, I guess, at this point, but for all of baseball as the biggest move over the last 24 hours. But, Michael, I think there were reports about Martino mentioning a delay. I know Cashman cleared up that it was just a matter of the medicals, so that kind of knocks out one of the questions I was going to open up with. But in terms of an extension, right, I think that's the thing that Yankee fans are most concerned about now. How likely is it that Soto signs an extension, knowing that Boras clients don't really sign extensions, or, their interest in bringing him back in general? What have you heard on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear in an ideal world, the Yankees would like to have him for multiple years. And what this gives them is, essentially a 1 year window, a tryout window, so to speak. What the Yankees are very clearly win now. They're coming off a pretty bad year, and, for their standards at least. And they want to give it everything they can to win a World Series. And this is a move that reflects that motive. Now, what I can say on the extension front is, like you mentioned, it's against what Boras usually does. Now, you look at the other side of the city, and he's been pretty clear, Boras has, that Pete Alonso is ready to talk about an extension. So, there's multiple things you can take from that. One, they're in different positions, but what I've sensed in talking to people who kind of know what's going on here is like the Yankees went in with an impression and an understanding that he wants to hit the market. Can that change? Absolutely. But Boras wants him to hit the market. He wants to hit the market. He's gotten thus far. He turned down a 14-year, $440 million contract from the Nationals years ago. And here he is, being traded now for the second time. No extension on the Padres. And now here he is on the Yankees. There's no reason to believe that's changed now only, a year away from the market. So my understanding, in all likelihood, he's probably going to hit the market.
Yeah, and I think Ken Rosenthal mentioned the point of, well, if the Yankees offer $500 million, that's a lot of money, but if that's the Yankees doing it on their own intuition, what does that number look like when there are other teams involved? Like, as you mentioned, the New York Mets, right? There's going to be pressure, from the Yankees to try to get a deal done, but they're probably not going to, as you mentioned. But, you're going to have teams like the Mets who are going to want to bid in that, and they're going to drive up the price. I don't know if the Dodgers are going to bid based off of, their interest in Ohtani and if they end up landing him or whatever, but they're going to be various suitors for the opportunity to sign a 26-year-old in his prime to a massive contract, and it will be a record-shattering contract, I imagine. But speaking of these two New York teams, they're both some of the biggest suitors for Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Now, you have mentioned, he has a robust market. The bidding's going to be closer to $300 million and $200 million, most likely. What have you been hearing on that front regarding his top suitors, and what could, if you had to make a final contract prediction, what are you going to give?
It's a great question. And, I have kind of pulled everyone here in terms of final numbers. And what the number that's come up the most is kind of between like $250 and $260 million. And then obviously you have that posting fee that you have to pay. So in all likelihood, like it's going to be approaching, if not over $300 million when you count in that posting fee. Now, here's what I'll tell you about suitors. The Mets are very interested. The Yankees are very interested. The Red Sox, the Blue Jays, very interested. In the case of the Blue Jays, I think a lot rides on their pursuit of Shohei Ohtani. If they strike out there, they are looking to add a top dog. So there's multiple interested suitors. And on top of that, I believe there's at least two other suitors who are interested. So there's a lot of competition for this guy. I talked to a team earlier who's in the mix here. I said, kind of, where do you have him? Like, obviously you have your projections. Like, when you're stacking him up against MLB pitchers who are in the league right now, where do you kind of see him when it all kind of sorts out? How does he compare? And he said that in some of their internal models, he projects as a top 5 starting pitcher in all of baseball, which is crazy because you would hope that's the case, right, with someone who's about to get $300 million. But, it's almost unprecedented given Ohtani didn't get nearly $300 million when he was coming from Japan. Senga got, what was it, like 75, $80 million when he was coming from Japan. That looks like a steal, which I think is also playing a part here. So, there was bargains to be had in the Japanese market in years past. I think teams are, they recognize that those bargains are no longer to be had, but there's still a price that should be paid for a pitcher who could be top five in the game, according to some of these teams. So teams to watch: Yankees, Mets, Blue Jays. I would throw in the Cubs there, and I would throw in the Red Sox. I mean, these are all suitors who I would keep an eye out for. His timetable, I would say between mid-December and the end of December, in that range, so a week out to 3 weeks out. That's the probable range. My guess is it's after Ohtani, in terms of when that kind of sorts itself out. He still wants to meet with teams. Obviously, the Mets flew to Japan to speak with him. Questions remain about, like, does he want to meet again? It depends on if he felt like all of his questions were answered, if he wants to meet again. Could also be some type of indication of how interested he is. That is unclear, and I think we'll get a better answer there when we find out if he wants to meet with them again. One thing I will say, for Yankees fans, something that Yamamoto has specifically outlined as something he likes is historic organizations. That's something that in his mind has value. That would include teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. Those teams have value. That's pretty much the only thing that's working against a team like the Mets here. What I can tell you is, like, there was rumors about the West Coast bias, that you want to go to the West Coast. I was told directly that's not true. And if anything, there was a slight lean towards the East Coast. So, but really, geography is not, to say the least, it's not a huge role here, right? Because, like, if there's rumors about West Coast and I'm hearing it might actually be East Coast, like, that probably means it doesn't matter, and the highest bidder is going to win here. And teams can say they're super interested, but what do you think all the other teams involved are saying? They're super interested, and so money talks. The highest bidder is probably going to be the one to win here, and we're just going to have to see how it plays out. But if I had to put an over-under, I'm saying around 250. I'm going to say 255 is my over-under.
Yeah, and another aspect of this is you're getting a guy who's 25 years old. So if you want to spread out that money over, let's say, 9-10 years, the AAV hit isn't of the one of, like, Garrett Cole's, where I think it's close to around $36 million. It could be under that $30 million range. And if, these projections live up to, what they believe he can be, you can get a top 5 starting pitcher without paying, that top of the market AAV. And there's probably going to be, would there be an opt-out built in there? I'd imagine from, like, Yamamoto's perspective, you have an opt-out in there. You opt out when you're, like, 29. You have MLB proven pedigree at that point. You could probably set the market for, the highest contract ever. I know I didn't throw that in as one of the questions, but have you heard anything about a potential opt-out?
It's interesting you say that, because just logistically speaking, like, with me thinking about it, I think the teams, if anything, would want some type of club opt-out. They're taking a potentially huge gamble here. When you're talking about giving $300 million to a player who's never played Major League Baseball, like, that's a huge risk, regardless of how your models see him. There's a transition period for all these guys when they come to the league. If you look at someone like Kodai Senga, like, he said transitioning to the MLB baseball took, like, weeks to months for him. Like, he struggled in spring training because he was just trying, like, there was a noticeable difference in the MLB baseballs versus the Japanese baseballs. So, like, there are huge parts of the transition from Japan to the MLB, and that's where, teams are aware of this, and, like, it's an educated risk that teams are willing to take. But if anything, there could totally be a player opt-out. If I'm a team involved here, like, I think I would at least mention, like, I want a team opt-out. And maybe that's 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But, there's risk here. I would be surprised if the teams didn't at least entertain that idea of, like, we want an opt-out. It doesn't have to be in year 1 or 2, but, like, year 3, 4, or 5, we would want a club opt-out to protect ourselves. If he's not a great MLB pitcher in the first 3, 4 years, obviously he's a young dude, but, like, do you want him for, if it's 8, 9 years, like the remaining 4 or 5 years, if he's an ineffective MLB pitcher? Like, probably not. So I would imagine, if anything, like I would say it's probably more likely there's a club opt out than a player opt out. But you're talking $300 million. Like, obviously the player is extremely valuable. It's entirely possible he gets a player opt out. So both of which are something to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, this is, I mean, unprecedented waters. We have not seen an international player come over here and say, you know what, this guy's going to get, you know, what, like a second or third largest pitching contract ever. Like, we don't even know if there are going to be incentives built in that creates more value. We don't know, right? Like, it's going to be a very interesting saga with, you know, a lot of top bidders. And kind of the big storyline here is the first time that Steve Cohen and the Hal Steinbrenner Yankees are going to, you know, go head to head on a free agent target. So should be very interesting. Keeping on the pitching front here, the Yankees have shown interest in bringing back Frankie Montas and Wally Peralta, according to numerous reports. But what are other pitchers on the Yankees' radar, obviously not including Yamamoto as well, we kind of already talked about him, that we should keep an eye on as they try to shore up their pitching depth?
It's a great question. First thing I'll touch on is, like, I have a great understanding of some of the trade guys that are out there. And, like, I have not heard the Yankees at least to date, on some of those 1 year rentals. Doesn't seem like they're really heavily invested in that market. I'm going to botch the name, but Shoto Imanaga, he's one that they have been linked to, as well as the Mets, the Red Sox, several other clubs. Obviously, he's also coming from Japan. And like you said, like, I think Frankie Montas is an interesting case. They have been tied to him. Obviously, he was on the Yankees. I don't think it went, kind of like a no shit moment. Like, I don't think it went as well as they had hoped with Frankie Montas, but I do think there's hope that in the future, maybe they can kind of, like, there was a reason they liked him in the first place, and a lot of those same reasons exist this time around. So, I think that's one to watch. Those are names I have for you now. It's unclear. Like, I have not heard their name associated with someone like Jordan Montgomery. Like, I have a firm understanding of his market. Like, I don't think they're in too hard there, at least at the moment. Yeah, and like I said, like, I haven't heard them really mention, at least like with the Rays, like maybe outside, like outside looking in, they're in, but not as much as some of the other teams that I've heard engaged there. C seems to be like in a holding pattern. So I would say Shoto Imanaga is one to watch. Frankie Montas is one to watch. Those are two that were put on my radar that I would keep an eye on.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of their focus is on Yamamoto, and a lot of their focus is, I mean, they just made a massive investment on Juan Soto. If they end up with Yamamoto, or even if they don't, they're right now currently in the mindset that they have to be prepared to make a massive financial investment there. So I don't think they're going to try to sign Montgomery or, do something like that before they even know where the Yamamoto market shakes out. And then also the glaring issue here of having already signed Carlos Rodon to a 6-year deal, having the massive contract with Garrett Cole. Like, do you want to tag on another if it's not for a guy like Yamamoto? So I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. Another big, I guess not an area of, weakness, I would say, because Gleyber Torres is a good second baseman. I'm very vocal about my belief that he helps this team, but there have been trade talks about him in recent years, right? Like at the deadline in 2022, that was a big topic. If you had to make a prediction, is he still going to be on the team on opening day?
I think so. And like, I have asked kind of like league insiders that have asked around, like, no one has heard that Gleyber Torres is available. And I have spoken with teams and said, like, give me the list of guys that you're talking around the league. Like, they're saying, like, hey, this guy's available. We just want to let you know. Like, his name is not one of them that has come up, which is probably an indication that, like, they are comfortable with him being on the opening day roster. Obviously, they just pulled off this huge move for Soto. Like, you didn't really hear about the team's willingness to ship off Gleyber Torres in a deal for Juan Soto. And, of all the like big moves they're going to partake in this offseason, where they might give up someone like Gleyber Torres, you would assume Juan Soto is probably number one in terms of how large that is. Yet no move for Gleyber. So my guess, he's probably on the opening day roster for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, and I would also add on, I personally feel like, and this is speculative on my part, which is why I wanted to hear you talk about it first. If you're going for Juan Soto, and as you mentioned, it's under the impression he's a 1 year rental, you're going for it, right? Like in my interpretation, the Yankees are going for it. Going for it shouldn't include dealing your second baseman for prospects and hoping that a combination of Peraza and LeMahieu gets the job done at second and third. Now, are the Yankees involved with anybody at the third base position? I know Cash mentioned that the position is secure, but he also did mention like Gio Urshela is a starting shortstop, and then he traded him for Josh Donaldson. I think a few days later. So have you heard anything on their interest in the third base market?
You know, I here's what I'll tell you there. Like, I asked around about the market for Matt Chapman. They were not a team that came up. So, it's possible they're lurking there. They're looking at a lot of maybe like the lower profile guys. I haven't heard it, personally. Heimer Candelario went yesterday to the Reds. Like, no mention of the Yankees being involved there. So I'm going to say probably unlikely. Like, once you go all in on Soto, you only have a certain amount of cash allotted to do other things here. And like that's a big thing. Like, here's what I'll tell you on Matt Chapman. Like, my understanding is he's probably going to be someone who signs in the latter half of the offseason, which would theoretically give them the ability to, like, if they strike out on Yamamoto, be like, hey, we have this money that we set aside for Yamamoto. Like, let's throw it on a high profile third baseman. Like, there's always a possibility that something like that happens. It just, to date, when you're looking at it, like, it's pretty clear Yamamoto is like four teams priority number one right now. The Yankees are one of them. And they're not going to be interested in a high profile third baseman until they figure out if they need to spend $255 million on Yamamoto. Like, and that makes sense, right? Especially after you just take on this big, at least 1 year commitment with Juan Soto. So, like, they need to be conscious of their spending, because if they really do want Yamamoto, which they do, like, they're not going to have space to also get a Matt Chapman and to also, like, need to be wise about their spending, and it sounds like to date they have been.
Yeah, and it almost kind of, the fact that they made all those outfield moves. I mean, they acquired three left-handed outfielders and kind of secured that entire position, the entire outfield relatively quickly in the span of 24 hours. They did so. So that would indicate, at least to me, that in terms of spending, as you mentioned, they're not going to go on and make anything and make any other moves that are going to preclude them from having the money for Yamamoto. It's going to be a huge investment, and again, they have the Judge deal, they have the Stanton deal, they have the Rodon deal, they have the Cole deal. They currently have over $30 million tied into Juan Soto. If they want any hopes of extending him, if you have Yamamoto, then that already kind of makes it a little dicey. If you don't extend Juan Soto and Matt Chapman is given a 9-figure contract, that's not going to look great. The fans are not going to love that very much. So, and from a baseball standpoint, also kind of a questionable decision. So, now that you've talked a little bit about some other guys in the market, there's still a decent amount of talent left. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani is the headliner of this free agent class. He's been the headliner since the market started. Have you been hearing any developments about him or any other players that we should keep track of in the coming weeks?
Yeah, and here's, I'll kind of touch on it. Like, his timetable is expected to be reasonably soon, and I would say we should have a Shohei Ohtani answer in the next week. Is what I'm thinking here. Talking to people who kind of are taking their best stab here at how serious players are, and it's hard to know. Like, one thing I'll say is, like, the Giants have done a great job of having absolutely no one know how involved they are here. Everyone kind of expects they're interested and they're lurking, but it's unclear. Like, there's no exact, like, they're in hard on Shohei Ohtani. Like, people assume it, but no one actually has gotten a great answer from the Giants. So they're a team to watch here. I will say I would watch the Dodgers, obviously. I would watch the Blue Jays. I think the Dodgers are most fearful of Toronto. A lot of press there. He looked at their facilities. Like, they just put in all these investments into the Rogers Center. Like, there's a lot of good things that are helping the Blue Jays out here. I think, whether or not it's been publicly said, there's an appeal to, like, representing an entire country here, right? Like, Toronto is Canada's representative in the MLB, and if Shohei Ohtani is the face of that team, like, he just gains this huge market on top of the Japanese market that follows him, like crazy. So I think that, Toronto, the Dodgers, I think the Cubs are in. I really think they're on the outside looking in here. I would say probably the same for the Angels, but you can't count him out. Like, he was happy on the Angels. Um, they gave him like kind of full autonomy to do what he wanted. I would say the major two players here are probably the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Maybe the Giants. It's hard to know. Like, I would be guessing with the Giants, and I want to be upfront there. Like, I don't know. Um, but I do know the Dodgers are in hard. I do know the Blue Jays are in hard. Like, I know the Blue Jays, they have been looking for a big name player, and that would be everything you could ever ask. So those are teams to watch. And like I said, like, I think we should expect an answer like in the next week. If I had to like guess an exact date, like probably earlier next week, if I had to put some type of date on it. I think, there might be some things to happen over the weekend, team meetings, kind of just like last second, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But if I had to guess, probably like early next week is when we get a Shohei Ohtani answer.
And if you had to predict which team he goes to, right now on December 7th, you have to make a pick. Who do you think he ends up with?
And I want to be clear that this is an educated guess. I think the Dodgers, when the Dodgers set aside money for a guy like this, it usually means like they're going to give it everything they have. It just makes a lot of sense. Like, he doesn't have to leave Los Angeles. It's like they're a super contender. They want him. Like, I know people are like, oh, well, Dave Roberts spoke about it. Does that take them out? Like, if they are willing to pay $30 million more than the next team, like, I'm sure the one like kind of like screw up by Dave Roberts is not going to be the one thing holding them back. And they can say all they want about like leaks, we will hold it against you. Like, the highest bidder's going to win here, like in all likelihood. It's possible, like, it's down to the Dodgers and the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays offer $5 million more, but like he's insistent on going to the Dodgers. Like, maybe, I mean, maybe, but I would say if I had to guess, the Dodgers, followed by like the Blue Jays and the Giants in order. Like, that's my guess. But again, it's a guess. Like, I'm not 100% certain how this thing will play out, and I think we'll have kind of a clear picture in the coming days leading up to next week.
And I think from a public perception standpoint, when you look at a team like, the Blue Jays in this situation, entering this offseason, it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion that Shohei Ohtani would go to the Dodgers, right? Like, we kind of already heard inklings about, the New York issues. That issue with New York was already apparent when the Yankees were initially interested back in 2017. So, now that it went from foregone conclusion to, well, hold up now, the Blue Jays have a legitimate chance here, I think that's kind of swayed, not saying that it's made it so that people think the Blue Jays have a better chance than they actually do, but more so from the perspective of they are more involved than I think people would have initially perceived. And, they're a real threat. Like, from everything we've seen, they seem like a very real threat. But as you mentioned with the Dodgers, that just kind of feels like right. Like, it feels like, all right, the Dodgers, they reset the luxury tax in a contention window too. Like, they didn't just do it, willy-nilly after like, an 85-win season. They did it with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman in their primes. He's their only long-term contract, that being Mookie Betts. It just makes sense, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. Now, this isn't a reporter question or like, asking for any, rumors or anything with like that, but I wanted to get a baseball opinion from you here. If you were to construct the Yankees lineup right now, you have Verdugo, Soto, I don't know if you want to start Christian, whatever you would do. How are you aligning that outfield? How are you aligning the lineup? Tell me how you do it.
Man, it's tough. Like, the first question is like, who's leading off? Maybe DJ LeMahieu. I mean, it's hard to know what you're going to get out of DJ LeMahieu next year. Like, I think that's going to be an interesting question when you're trying to kind of forecast production. But he's probably going to be in the top half of the lineup. I would say probably Judge 2, Soto 3, maybe Rizzo 4. And then after that, like, I'm an Alex Verdugo fan. I think he's a pretty good player. Like, maybe he goes 5, maybe he goes 6. That's kind of Gleyber territory. And at this point, we haven't even mentioned someone like Giancarlo Stanton. So I'll put him, for the purpose of this, maybe like 6, 7. And then I think Volpe has to go. He's probably not your 9 hitter. So I'll put him at 8. And then, whoever is catching, obviously you lost Higgy here. So if it's Wells, if it's like, that's going to be something they have to determine is like who's their catcher. But I would say whoever is catching is 9 in that scenario. But a lot of interesting questions, and it's hard to know the production you're going to get out of some of these guys. It's so hard to predict. Like, I think Juan Soto is one of the best players in baseball, like without dispute. Like, he is fantastic. I've seen some interesting things. Like, the book is out on him. Like, he does not pull the ball. Like, he's never been a pull hitter. It's part of why he's such a great player, is he can spread it to all fields. But interesting enough is like the perks about lefties playing at Yankee Stadium is the pull hitters reap the benefits of the short porch and right. And like, that's not going to be something that he's fantastic at. Like, he has so much power. I'm sure he still hits 30 home runs next year. But, I think everyone's kind of like expecting him to utilize the short porch and right. Like, it's not necessarily his game. He has enough power to still get by and hit 30 home runs, but like, I'm not expecting him to just be pulling the ball, like left and right and just hitting bombs over the short porch. Like, maybe he makes an adjustment there. I saw like he hit 35 home runs, and if he played in Yankee Stadium last year, it was 27. I'm sure his OPS still would have been 900 in that circumstance, right? Like, he's a phenomenal player, but I wouldn't be shocked if the power numbers take a slight step back. Like the Padres ballpark isn't great for hitting conditions either, and he had 35 home runs. So it's hard to predict. But I think, like I said, like a lot of variables at play here with like, how is DJ LeMahieu next year? Like, how is Verdugo? How do you want to utilize someone like Trent Grisham? Like, is he purely off the bench? He should be, for the record. But, these are questions you're going to have to ask, and kind of, I imagine there will be in-season changes here based on the performance of hitters. Like, if DJ's having a bad year, like, bump him down and put someone up to 1. So these are questions they got to have, but that's kind of my stab at it, just from baseball person analysis.
Yeah, I would say that the best answer I'd give here is that the lineup on opening day is probably not going to be the lineup order on like even July 1st, right? And
Totally.
I do think it's an important thing to mention. Yeah, the pull side power for Juan Soto is not what you would expect, right? Or not that what you would expect. It's not what people I think are imagining as much, right? Like, I think the advantage of Yankee Stadium for lefties gets overplayed for Soto here because it's not his game. Maybe for a guy like Verdugo, who like in years past has had like, hey, he's had to make adjustments in Boston to go away from pulled fly balls, but he can go back to that in Yankee Stadium. Or even a guy like Trent Grisham, who not really also a massive pulled fly ball guy, but is a guy that's more malleable in that sense. You're not going to ask Juan Soto to make, massive changes offensively. He's Juan freaking Soto. You might be more willing to do that for a guy like Grisham, or for like Verdugo, or for whoever that may be. And of course, you're relying on Volpe, Wells, potentially Peraza, at some point, maybe Dominguez, and those are guys that are not sure things, right? Like, Volpe didn't have the best rookie year offensively. Wells only had like a month of playing time. Peraza really hasn't stuck at the major league level. And Dominguez, his week was great, but it was 1 week of baseball. Like, we've seen great weeks of baseball. I'm not trying to downplay, of course. I'm a big Jason Dominguez fan, but I think that's all important here. And then even the veterans, right? Like, usually you expect your veterans to be the sure things. Rizzo's not a sure thing. I believe in him, but doesn't mean he's a sure thing. Stanton has not been an effective hitter for about a year and a half. He is the farthest thing from a sure thing, health-wise and performance-wise. And then LeMahieu, great second half, but older. He's a year older. He's entering his age 36 season. And he had a down year compared to 2022. So a lot of questions for the lineup there. But Michael, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. Where can we find your work? I know you mentioned it's really much just Twitter at this point. But drop the app. We're going to drop the link. Let us know where we can find you, man.
Yeah, Marino MLB, pretty much only primarily Twitter. And it's up to you. Like, I can kind of run through. I have a pre-prepared list of like notes and kind of like empty in the notebook type thing. I can kind of run through them.
Yeah. I know that we talked about like having, I would want 100% empty the notebook, my man.
All right, I'm emptying it. Okay, on Soto, here's what I'll tell you. A lot of questions about kind of teams involved here, like what are the Yankees? When it came to the final steps, like it was really the Yankees. And my understanding is like the Padres first sent an offer that ended up being like pretty similar to the final offer that was agreed upon to the Yankees. They then went to the Blue Jays and kind of fielded what that would look like. A name that came up there was Alek Manoah, who the Padres were intrigued about. Kind of went nowhere. Like there was an unwillingness for the Blue Jays to kind of put together this massive package. Like, they're in on Ohtani. They don't want to screw that up. They could feel that Soto was moving along. Like, they kind of took themselves out here. And that kind of led to Preller going back to the Yankees like, all right, let's just wrap this thing up. Like, let's try to get to a deal here. And the Yankees ultimately felt like they made an internal decision. And initially, when they got the first offer from the Yankees, from the Padres, that included both King and Thorpe, they were taken back. Like, they were like, what? Like, you want 7 players for Juan Soto and Trent Grisham? Like, that's ridiculous. They came back, they talked internally, and they're like, it's Juan Soto. Maybe we got to get rid of King and Thorpe to make this happen. And that's kind of how these things progressed. I'll run through a list of free agents and kind of tell you what I'm hearing. Glass now, he's trade guy. Market's becoming a lot more clear. I believe 2 teams here, one of which I kind of have to keep to myself, but like, I would watch the Cubs here. They're a serious suitor. But there are kind of, it's locking in. It's getting to a point where like it's down to 2 realistic teams with other teams on the peripheral, kind of tracking this thing. Randy Arozarena, it's no certainty he's dealt, but teams are calling, especially when they hear that Randy Arozarena might be dealt. They're going to call. I would watch Seattle as a team here. There's a team in the NL West that is monitoring it that I can't really delve into too much, but there's multiple teams that are intrigued with the idea of Randy Arozarena. No certainty he's dealt, but they're going to call until they hear no. And obviously, the way Tampa works, like, they will take calls on everyone. Cease, it was reported, which is accurate, like, they're going to hold off, wait to see how Yamamoto plays out. I would watch the Orioles. I know Atlanta was kind of rumored. I'll tell you this, and I could take you through the entire process of the Braves offseason. They came in with 2 pitchers they really liked. They really liked Sonny Gray. They really liked Aaron Nola. Both pitchers go off the board. Their next plan was, let's kind of figure out what Erod is looking for. Pretty soon enough, they're like, all right, Erod, that's not going to work for us. They then looked at Cease. Well, here's the thing. They don't like Boris agents. They don't like Boris rep clients. You look at them like they literally just traded away their last Boris repped player in a trade. So pretty clear, like, Boris wants to be wants his players to be paid. Pretty much everyone understands that, like, the Braves get these great deals out of nowhere. You get this notification that they locked up so-and-so player for like way under market value. That's not happening with someone that's rep by Scott Boras. And so there's reason to have doubt about the possibility of Cease and the Braves. Bellinger, I would at least track him for the Yankees. I don't think, I think he's one of the guys that they were watching. It's unclear, given the Soto trade, how that impacted. And I'm going to make some calls here, but like, I would also watch the Giants, especially if they miss out on Yamamoto. Cubs return can't be ruled out. I don't know if they're a front runner there. Like, I think the Giants might be more probable than the Cubs. Hader, I've heard the relief market's going to start moving soon. That's kind of like the next one. Kimbrel kind of got us started off there. Like, I would watch the Texas Rangers for Josh Hader. There are other teams very much involved for him, but that's a team I would watch. Giolito, Morosi had a tweet up, and he had like 6 teams in there, and the Mets were one of them. Like, I've heard pretty much all of them are involved except for the Mets. So a lot of suitors there. He's going to get a reasonable chunk of change for what he should be paid, which was, if you watched him this past year, like, it was a mixed bag. So my guess is he gets a little bit more money than most people think. Jordan Montgomery, 3 teams in there. There's more than 3, but like the 3 main players are the Mets. I would watch the Red Sox, and I would watch Texas. There's other teams involved here still, but I think they want to see how Yamamoto shakes out. Unclear if he wants to go before or after Yamamoto, but he's going to be a fallback for several teams, including the Mets. Manuel Margot, the Yankees were in. Then they got Juan Soto and Juan Soto, Trent Grisham. They're probably out. That's my guess. The Mets were the other team that made a call there. Both of them kind of got reasonably close in trade talks, but nothing ever progressed to the finish line. Michael A. Taylor, he's a guy I would watch for several teams. The Mets have talked to him. They've also talked to Jung Ho Lee. And it's that one's going to be interesting. Like the Padres are mentioned as a team really involved there. Like I would not be shocked. I talked about Shota Imanaga. Like I would watch the Yankees, I would watch the Mets, I would watch the Red Sox. Like the big market teams are in there, and I think that's it on the notebook. So there you go. Emptied my notebook a little bit, but yep, I'll kind of go back to your question at Marino MLB on Twitter. That's all I got. So if you want to find my stuff, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, guys, if you guys want reports before, look, the whole Yamamoto thing with that contract, that came out from Marino before we saw, even Jeff Passan included in his article. So look, guys, if you guys want reports, if you want them, you want them on various teams, not just the Yankees, not just the Mets, all over. Michael's your guy. And again, we'll have your Twitter account linked in the description below. Thank you for stopping by. We really appreciate you joining the show. And everybody, have a great rest of your day. You guys know you can check us out on various social media platforms, including Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.